pee and looks out
Yes.
on the edge of the bed or something.
Okay,
Yes.
so we're live streaming now.
Okay.
Should be.
Maybe we won't talk about that.
No. No, let's not.
And
We don't want to embarrass anybody.
are you still seeing on your side my image?
It changed a little because now
Oh.
there's a white next to it. Oh yeah, it says I'm live now. Look at that. Hi, anybody who's out there. Cool.
It says you're live now. I don't see that. Where does that?
It popped up on my phone saying that.
Oh, on your phone. Okay.
That it's live.
Okay. Oh yeah, I can see it now on your desktop. Great.
Oh yeah, it says live. Yep. Okay.
Oh, that's good.
Here we are. So we're here and on and recording.
Okay.
And so let's start letting people in.
Yeah.
Okay, here I go. Saying hello. This is a full-time job.
Is there not an admit all button?
I don't know. I haven't found that yet, but it's kind of fun seeing who I remember.
Nice.
Lots.
Welcome, everybody.
People too. Welcome, everybody. So great. Wow. I'm seeing lots of familiar people. Rashawn, is there a welcome everybody button?
There's an admit all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where? Oh, let's see if I can find that.
Usually if you click on the participants and it opens up a box, it's in the top right, in my experience.
Top right.
Hi, Michael. Good to see you.
Hello, everybody. Hi, Catherine.
Hello from the Berlin group. How cool. Is it
Hi,
like
Jan.
Oh,
6 p.m.? There's
the
Michael.
Berlin group is where I was yesterday.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, it's a recovery group. It was really a great meeting. Interesting people.
And are they in Berlin?
No.
Oh.
I think they were. Patrick was in Berlin. He's now in LA. So it was a very different
right.
place, but that's where it started, I think. Yeah, it's a big group because when they went online, it just expanded like crazy. So lovely to see people. Okay. So shall we get started? Rashawn, I can still see the cover. There we go. Yeah. Beautiful. Hi, Michael. How's your toe? Are you recovering?
Oh, my toe is, it's there.
Oh.
It's going to be okay. Thank you for asking.
Did you break it or stub it?
I dislocated it.
Oh.
Yeah.
I've broken my toe. It's really painful. It's amazing how painful toes are.
So painful.
Yeah. I mean, this is a full-time job letting people in. I can't find this invite all. I'll have to work on that, Arielle.
Okay.
But hello, everybody. Hi, Mina. Catherine O'Kane. Hello. Nice to see you here. Hi, Suzanne. Hi. Wow. So big group of people coming. Okay. Yeah. So, Rashawn, can you take over admitting people and then we can start with a nice body practice?
Yep.
Okay, great. Excellent. Thank you. Okay. So this is a first time for us doing live stream on the PVI group. It feels like we're growing up or something. we're becoming big and important or something. Lots more people signing up. I think it's Arielle and I were just saying, I think it's partly because of the conference, the Florida conference, and lots of energy came from that and spreading all over the world, which is so beautiful. So we always start with a lovely kind of somatic practice. So just to, take a minute to come into our bodies. This is our home in polyvagal land and in felt sensing. So settling yourself, kind of getting ready. You might want to stand up. Welcome to stand up if the body says that you need to kind of move around. Or sitting might also feel really nice and comfy and cozy. Here in Toronto, it's a very rainy day, lunchtime, but we're here from all over the world, so. Okay, and then just getting a sense of whether you want to close your eyes or maybe not. And it's kind of orienting yourself to the room that you're in. And you might want to just notice some things around you. And just getting a sense of whether it feels okay and safe to just soften your gaze. You don't have to, but it might feel really nice. And then slowly dropping your attention somewhere down into the center of your body. And let's just start with our practice of neuroception. Just getting a sense of how is my body carrying itself today? Just getting a sense of whether there's some nice, what we call flock energy, grounded ventral energy in the body. Maybe you're noticing a bit of constriction up in that kind of sympathetic fight-flight place. Maybe there's more of a kind of folding in, collapsing in the body. Just checking to see where am I in my nervous system as we're all gathering here together. And then just inviting a question down into the body. How is it for me inside? Right in this moment in our group, in the wonderful Polyvagal Institute. And notice where your body is speaking to you. There's a particular place, a physical sensation in the body that's calling to you, that wants a little bit of kind attention. And just seeing if you can be with yourself the way that you would be with somebody that you really care about. And then just noticing if that invitation brings in a little more ventral, safe energy into the body. And then when you're ready, we slowly feeling your feet on the floor. And slowly coming back to our group. So hello, everybody. And I'm here today with my new friend, Arielle Schwartz. Hello, Arielle. So we had a wonderful connection at the Florida Polyvagal Institute conference that just happened. It was I guess over a month ago now. Yeah. And we had a nice walk along the almost beach. We were pretty busy.
Right.
Yeah. And I thought it would be really great to have you come and share with us your wonderful work.
Thank you.
I was talking with you about writing a workbook, and I think did you just have one come out? I thought I saw you give a copy to Steve Porges.
I did. It's the one that's behind me here. It's the therapeutic yoga for trauma, and Steve wrote the foreword for it.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's spend some time chatting together about you and your work, and then we'll open it up. Rashawn's going to watch the live stream, and for people that are in our group as well. And there will also be, of course, a recording available. There always is. So when we shared a little bit before, you began to talk with me about how you got into all of this at the very beginning. And I know it's a common question, right, that we get asked, right? But it's such a great question. It's like, what's the journey that brought you to all of this work that you're doing? And your work is incredibly prolific.
Thank you.
You're a busy person.
I'm a busy person. That is true.
Yeah.
True. And I think I want to respond to your question, like really way back in terms of how I got started with this. And it feels really salient right now. I'm actually going to start with a dream that I had 2 days ago and lead in from there.
Yeah, beautiful. Wonderful.
So I had a dream that I woke up with yesterday, and the dream was one of those dreams that for me, it's not an uncommon territory where my dream takes place because it's on my yoga mat. And it's kind of funny that I dream about being on my yoga mat, but it's a place that I'm on a lot in my waking life. So it shows up in my dreamscape. And in this particular dream, I'm on my yoga mat and I can't see the teacher. I'm a student in the class and I can't see the teacher. And I'm frustrated because I can't find her. Like, where is she? I can't see past the other people. Finally, I see her and she's instructing a posture that like is just kind of ridiculous. Like, I don't even, like once I finally see it, I'm like, that doesn't even look comfortable. Like, why would I do that? And so finally I like raise my hand. I'm like, can I ask a question? And the question I asked in the dream was, what do you do when feelings of abandonment come up on your yoga mat? And I started to cry in the dream. And what the teacher responded in the dream was totally left brain and totally like espousing some like wisdom. They're like, well, when imposter syndrome comes up, and they like have this whole thing, and like, who doesn't have imposter syndrome, right? But I was like, well, that wasn't my question. And I turned to the teacher and I said, I'd rather hear from them. And I pointed to the other students. And then I woke up. And
That's a great dream.
It's a great dream. I'm still working with it. It's still fresh, but I think I start there because I think that's kind of what brings me to this work is my own experience, my very own kind of most intimate journey. And, what does it mean to be human, and my own journey of knowing what abandonment feels like, which so many of us do. And the way that showed up for me, especially as a child, was having experiences of feeling frozen or cut off from my body, feeling like I couldn't think clearly, feeling like I didn't have my voice. So it showed up both somatically, and it showed up as a way of really leading me to question my identity and my sense of self, because I would go into these places where I just thought I was stupid because I couldn't think.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, like,
I know that place.
I don't have like, oh, that's such a frustrating place. But that was what led me to ultimately like feel like when I learned polyvagal theory, which I initially learned in the maybe around 2010, something like that. So
me too. Yeah.
And I was at a conference with Steve, and I was sitting there and I was taking copious notes because I kept feeling like, this helps me understand the freeze. This helps me understand all of these different states I was going into. And I had it kind of embedded in it, and something that Steve said at the conference, which was so touching to me. He says, when someone asked, what does polyvagal theory mean to you? Do you remember this question at the end of the conference?
I do.
And he said something like, it's a reminder of the benevolence of the capacity for benevolence that lives within human connection. Such a touching response. And I think when we don't, like, our bodies know when that benevolence is available, when that acceptance or understanding or welcoming environment is there, and our bodies know when it's not there.
They sure do.
Yeah. And so those early experiences of freeze, or we could put dissociation in there, we could put, complex trauma in there, all of that, basically led me into my own healing journey of integration. And the places where I found that most strongly was through the body, right? Through experiences, whether that was on my yoga mat, not the dream yoga mat where I was like, this teacher's not working for me, but like literally safe, trustworthy teachers who helped hold beautiful, nourishing containers that allowed me to come home to myself. And also through body-centered work, like body-mind centering and other arenas where I could drop in and I could feel. And all of a sudden, I'm discovering like, wait a second, I'm kind of smart. I can think clearly. I can articulate things, right? Somewhere in me was 7 books, right? Like somewhere in there. Right? But it took those safe arenas, the safe and social and community spaces for me to emerge back out.
And you also had said that, and I think this, this makes it so much easier to find our way into body, is that I think you'd said that your stepdad was a yoga teacher. Is that right? I got that. So you had that early exposure to somebody who is connected to the body.
Exactly. And
what a gift that is, right? And your mom too.
Yeah, so I really grew up from the age of 2 across 2 different households. One where essentially I felt deeply safe and accepted, and one where I didn't. And so kind of straddling and knowing 2 different worlds.
Yeah. Isn't that's so interesting? Now, if you think about that from an attachment point of view and polyvagal perspective, you've got 2 homes, 2 attachment systems going, as so many kids do now, right?
Yeah.
So many all over the world. And your neuroception is adapting to both of those different spaces that you're frequenting a lot. And that makes for so much more complexity, and it also really challenges attachment theory, I think.
Oh, I write about that a lot, Jan. I really think that we have multiple attachment strategies, right?
Yeah.
And that we move between those strategies in different environments that evoke them. So, and there's a lot about that. We're not making that one up. So,
no.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important to emphasize it. And also that we have different cultures that create different styles of attachment, right? So, yeah. But, you know, I can hear, you know, Steve talking about how, well, then you would have, he would say in his language, a portal for this ventral place, right? In this sense that you're saying, well, I had one home that I felt very safe in.
It's very true.
Yeah.
It's very true. And I think because of that, I knew what coming home to myself felt like. Like there was a familiarity because I did have that home.
Yeah. 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 I had that too with my grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have it with my initial family, mom and dad, but I did have it with my grandparents at until I was 5 when my folks separated. So yes, I think often that coming home to that ventral place, what a gift.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so when we don't have that, and some cultures, you know, more than others, really don't have a lot of that, like indigenous cultures, and this beautiful way of attaching to the land, to the water, right? To the trees. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting you bring nature in because I think that became the other touchstone for me. You know, I grew up by the ocean. I grew up in New York on Long Island. And even though inside of the non-safe house, I couldn't find it there, I could step outside and within minutes be on the water. And that became the other attachment place in a sense.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So important to bring that in. Yeah. So what's kind of got you really curious these days, Arielle Schwartz? Where are you kind of exploring? Because you're a real explorer, right?
It's true. Yeah. Thanks for saying that.
Yeah, yeah.
I think the piece that maybe I'm just going to loop back to the conference for a moment, and I know that there's some folks here that were with us there, and really one of the pieces that was so nourishing there was actually, again, being on the ocean. And Jen, I don't think you ever made it to any of the morning yoga sessions, but each morning I went out and had the opportunity to guide generally about 40 folks would come outside and we would create this circle or a semicircle out on the beach and watch the sunrise and practice together. One of the most beautifully nourishing things that I'm taking away from that experience. And I think that the combination of where yoga and the natural world and polyvagal theory and psychotherapy, where those all intersect, certainly is where my kind of soul is sparked.
Yeah,
I think about it that way. In terms of where it shows up professionally for me right now, I have kind of two related projects, one or three. One is the one that just came out recently, which is the Therapeutic Yoga for Trauma book, which begins this intersection of polyvagal theory and yoga. And there's a whole lot in there. And Steve and I have had the opportunity, Steve Porges and I had the opportunity to basically have several conversations about where yoga and polyvagal theory intersect over the last few years, because I started teaching the Therapeutic Yoga for Trauma course, and Steve came in as a portion of that.
Yeah.
And so like these questions about like how polyvagal theory in a way is naming something that we've known and that humans have known for thousands of years.
Yes, absolutely.
These practices of rhythmic breathing and being able to kind of recognize how humming, for example, Brahmari pranayama and yoga, humming and what's happening in the throat and what's happening in the ear and how we're cultivating these states of safety.
Yes.
And where movement comes in and why movement. I'm thinking of something else that was spoken about at the conference, but how humans have gathered together for thousands of years around drumming, around singing, around chanting, ritual, right? Like, and what that does for us as communities and why we need that, right? Thinking about our pandemic and, you know, the amount of isolation that we went through across that time period and the distance that many of us experienced from the communities that maybe held those rhythmic spaces. Like I've sung in choirs my whole life. Choirs have been some of that kind of rhythmic community space.
Yeah, yeah, and how hard that was for
Mm-hmm.
so many people who really that's their source of community and a lot of ventral practice. Yeah, and losing that, and yeah, it's been a really hard time.
Right.
But do you feel in your body a kind of shifting and rejuvenation, that there are more spaces now where people are beginning to come together, at least
Right.
in the Western Hemisphere? It feels a little, some
Sure.
parts feel safer, right?
I think that was what was so touching about being at the conference as well, is that it was the really the second. I had been to one other conference earlier in the summer where I'd also been able to teach yoga to a group of psychiatrists. It was very precious. It was a beautiful experience. And then being at the conference and practicing together and learning together and being together, just so deeply moving. And yes, these feelings of opening back up or returning. And it's been amazing to me what Zoom has offered, right? What these virtual spaces.
Isn't it incredible? Yeah. Yeah. And do you find even with you have a psychotherapy practice as well. So do you find that in those sessions, you're able to really make these?
Oh, sure.
Isn't it incredible? These deep connections. My friends don't believe me. They think I've lost my mind. I'm like, really, that I can feel their judgment. It's like, how can that be real? But I think it's a lot of it is because we focus a lot on safety and we're embodied.
Right. Yes.
So, even now when we start with these embodied practices, it just brings another dimension to this experience of Zoom.
Yes. Yes, it's true. I still teach my therapeutic yoga on Zoom. I was sharing that a few weeks ago. I had 260 people sign up for a yoga class. I was like, what? like in person, what size room would we need? But on Zoom, it works. And it's so precious. And I think when we start by connecting with self and connecting with other, and then, in the therapeutic yoga class, then we connect through movement and we connect through breath. And then we return back and connect, basically in the gallery view back in the Zoom space. And it absolutely works. I mean, I've been teaching yoga face-to-face in rooms. I've been teaching therapeutic yoga for and yoga for over 25 years. I mean, a very long time. And it's been absolutely remarkable how translatable it is into the virtual space.
Yeah, thank goodness.
I know.
Yeah. So how about shall we open it up a little bit and see if people have got some questions and we can interact with other people, and maybe Rashawn, are you noticing anybody with hands up? Everybody's welcome to let us know, and maybe in the chat as well.
And I've got my
have you got something here? Something.
No, I'm just going to tell people, if you're on my Facebook Live and you want to put a comment there, I'll see if I can track them there too.
Yeah. Rashawn, are you seeing anything?
No, not yet.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay. I was going to share while we're waiting for questions, I was going to share the kind of end of the sentence that I started before, which was just that I've got some other projects that are brewing that continue to be on this intersection. So the therapeutic yoga book that's here is certainly something that can be used by therapists with individual clients, but it's not specific for that arena. So that's the new project, is really looking at the integration of therapeutic yoga into psychotherapy, which is exciting for me. Yeah. Kind of what does that look like, and how do we bring in? For a long time, I've looked at things like vagus nerve stimulation and how do we do that naturally, and neuromodulation of how are we working with the nervous system and using those tools of breath or self-applied touch, right? Self-havening or right, or pressure points, those kinds of things, humming or eye movements, and how they relate to neuromodulation and regulation of the nervous system. But in both of these projects, I think what I also just want to name is that it's not just about getting into ventral. And I think that was a theme that we kept seeing at the conference as well. It's like we can gain a sense of safety and connection, and that becomes the foundation that then allows us to embrace more have more capacity to handle excitement, or to tolerate stress, or to turn towards something that feels scary, and to not go into avoidance mode. We actually can be with the intensity of something that is a chosen challenge. Or we can work through the unchosen challenges, right? The traumatic experiences, because we can be with the intensity that evokes in us.
Yes,
And,
yes.
And not let the avoidance take over, or the fear of what that could feel.
Yeah. So it's really part of the window of tolerance, right? That you're speaking about, is really having that greater range of capacity. This is what I loved about Gendlin's work too, is that he created this experiencing scale, the father of the felt sense, and, ways of being able to assess how deeply am I going into the body. And that the more that we can know we can keep ourselves safe, the more adventurous our life can be, right? Yeah, that we can go anywhere if we know we can come back to something that rests inside. And it just makes life so much more interesting.
Right. And I think so often, as much as I want to say that we all know what that place feels like inside, or home, or that safe ventral vagal, but it's something that I think we also, if we didn't have a safe home or grandparents or those locations, that we really do need to rely a bit more on the other, right? On that relational space, or in polyvagal language, the way that co-regulation precedes self-regulation.
Yes.
That I have that felt sense that you are a safe person to allow me to go in, and then I'm kind of borrowing your window for a little while.
Yeah.
And ultimately that helps me build mine.
Right, exactly, totally. And that's why I think it's so important as therapists that we really, we are our tool.
Yeah.
We are our instrument, right? And that we really take very seriously that developing that capacity to stretch that capacity for presence. And,
yes.
and not just tolerating deep in experiencing, but really welcoming it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, absolutely. I call that like the relational felt sense, where you're really feeding into and supporting the other person's capacity to stretch there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think one of the pieces, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well, but one of the biggest challenges that can show up in any body-centered work, certainly yoga, I imagine, and focusing, certainly in my work as a somatic therapist, is the fear of, right? The fear of connecting to the breath, the fear of connecting to the body, right? This whole idea that, like, if I feel any of that, I'll be overwhelmed. It'll be too much. I won't be able to handle it. And so, we can build that through titration and in small bits of turning towards some of the discomfort, coming back to the relational safety, or those cues of safety in the room, and kind of work with that edge of, where does it feel like it's not safe? Yeah. And so often the feeling that comes along with it's not safe is historical. Right?
Yeah.
Like, if I can orient to the fact that actually, if I breathe now, nothing bad's going to happen, other than I'll feel the discomfort of what happened in the past. And so then how can I kind of do what we call in EMDR, kind of sustained dual attention or dual awareness state, where I can hold enough of that footing in the here and now sense of safety as I touch into the historical memory of when it wasn't safe.
Yeah, this is blending, we would call it in focusing, right? Blending.
Of course, there's a version of it there, right?
Yeah.
Right. And in somatic experiencing, it's often referred to as uncoupling, right?
Yeah.
This idea that the nervous system got coupled with, like the breath got coupled with fear. And so now if that's overcoupled, and when I breathe, I'm sensing into that sympathetic nervous system, how can I actually learn to breathe in a new way?
Yeah. This is the rewiring, right? The faulty wiring and the faulty neuroception and the rewiring, all these different terms for the same processes, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I think that is so true, that when we bring attention right into the present moment, that right here and now together, as far as we know, we are okay, we're safe in this moment right here, right? And that's all we ever know anyway, right?
That's right.
All we ever know.
Yeah. And even if we know that when I walk out of your office, for example, if I were a client, right, and if I were to walk out of your office and be confronting environments where I don't feel safe, where I'm not safe, that I can still use the reference point of what I'll now call the island of safety, and allow my body to attune to what that feels like, even though it's an island in a sea where there's still sharks out there.
Yeah, so much so. So we can reference that felt sense experience, right? We would say. But everybody has a different, it's a resource, right, in the body.
Yeah.
And come back and hold on to that as we're venturing out, or it ventures into us.
Exactly.
Either way.
Right.
Yeah.
We have a ton of questions.
Okay.
Now.
Okay, Rashad. People are waking up.
I don't even know where to start. There's some on Zoom in the chat. People are asking, and there's also a ton on your Facebook channel, Arielle.
Just give us a few.
Okay, well, here's one from Catherine O'Kane. Can you share one basic or fundamental technique for ventral vagal nerve stimulation?
Sure. Yeah. There's a few I was thinking that I might want to share today. And I think the first piece that I'll name about the breath, and this may be relatively common knowledge, and even so, it is so worth repeating, that when we look at the breath, we recognize that every inhalation, the heartbeat is going to increase a little bit. We're going to, in a way, kind of pull the vagal brake off, and we're going to have a little bit more sympathetic activation with our inhalations. Every exhalation is going to slow the heart rate. That vagal brake is going to return. We're going to access a bit more of the parasympathetic nervous system. So you can think of the breath itself as a nervous system wave, and that the health of our nervous system in an ideal healthy functioning manner is that that we are able to move rhythmically between sympathetic and parasympathetic. For so long, the parasympathetic nervous system got kind of praised as the relaxation response and the key to health. The sympathetic nervous system got kind of demonized as the cause of all stress and disease. And that's not an accurate picture. And that's why polyvagal theory is so valuable, is that we recognize that actually what is health of the nervous system is the capacity to move rhythmically between sympathetic and parasympathetic. So when we look at the most direct way to reclaim that balance, it's the breath. And in the simplest form, if you think about trying to kind of find an even breathing pattern, a rhythmic breathing pattern where you can add a count, it gives your left brain something to do, where you count maybe for a 4 or 5 count inhalation and a 4 or 5 count exhalation. You're creating a rather balanced shape to your nervous system if you do that, say, for several minutes. And if you're someone who's more keyed up in the sympathetic and you want to create more balance, emphasize your exhale. So if you do a 4-6, right, a 4 count inhale and a 6 count exhale, or a 4-8, and really lengthen that exhalation, you're communicating back to your brain via the body. We're safe now. When you look at animals in nature, animals will only exhale longer than their inhale when they're safe. Right? So we're keying in to that biological basis. And rather than trying to have mind tell body we're safe, we're going to let body tell brain we're safe by changing how we're breathing. Right? You can try it as I'm speaking to you. I can't do the breath and talk at the same time, but, try it for yourself. And on the flip side, if you're someone that tends towards collapse, hypoarousal, depression, emphasize your inhalation, right? So that you can maybe explore what happens when you do a 6 count inhale and a 4 count exhale, right? And notice how your body starts to give you feedback.
Yeah. It's such a simple one, and it's so valuable. so incredibly valuable because it's right there, and we can access it anywhere, anytime, on the subway, driving the car,
Exactly.
Anywhere, anytime. Yeah.
And when you're paying attention to your breath, it is an immediate anchor for your attention into the present moment. Right. And I find that with so many of the elements of yoga. And, if I were to add on, so if that's the basic practice of natural vagus nerve stimulation, you can add on like just placing your hands over your heart and then imagining that breath coming in and out of your heart. You could then layer into that, something that brings up, as you guided us in that first exercise, something that brings up a natural feeling of warmth or self-compassion or loving kindness, right? If you were to kind of turn towards that feeling in yourself, like you would turn towards a loved one, how kind that becomes.
And this really is the felt sense polyvagal model, because what we're doing there, right, is integrating a neuroceptive practice of breath with an interoceptive practice of felt sensing.
Yes.
And with those two practices, you've got it. It's amazing how that brings us into, where am I now? Here I am.
Yeah.
Here I am.
Right.
And such a lovely way of explaining that, Arielle. You're so good at that. Like how really explaining things very clearly and concisely so that people can remember it. Because we forget, it's like you were saying before too, when we're in that place where we're all confused, the prefrontal cortex goes crazy and then we don't remember things very well. So
right. And then, continuing with like this idea of layering on, right? So now we've got this foundation of breath and maybe some self-compassion in the mix. And then maybe we do something like a humming practice, and you can explore, where do you feel that humming vibrate in your chest or in your throat or in your head, depending on the tone. You can even amplify the felt experience by, in yoga, the traditional practice is that you cover your ears. And if any of you try it, which you won't be able to hear me if you do it now, but you could try it later, right? Kids do this. How many of you have done this when you were a kid or even now as an adult? Like you're like, la, 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 I'm not listening to you, but you start humming with your thumbs in your ears and you're like, that's all I can hear. Cool. I'm happy now. So you can add humming into the mix. And then eye movements are a really interesting layer to this. Right? Like I've been kind of looking at what are the functions of eye movements for years, especially when I was writing the EMDR and somatic psychology book, of like, why do eye movements work in EMDR? What is happening there? And there's been eye yoga for centuries, right? Like eye movements have been incorporated into yoga practice in so many ways, both bilaterally, moving side to side, up and down, focusing on a drishti with a single point for your gaze, focusing close in, focusing far away. And all of these different shifts of attention with the eyes are impacting the brain in different ways. In some ways, kind of bilateral integration, this idea of crossing hemispheric, and also stimulating different neurochemistry. There's some interesting piece out there around like kind of the dopamine response of eye movements and how it helps us confront something we're afraid of. So
fascinating.
Layers.
So many layers. Yeah. Okay, Rashan, another question or comment?
All right, just was on mute. So next question is from your Facebook page, from Angie McDowell Red. How do you support yourself when you lack enough safety to even start with the breathing, etc., especially when you haven't had that space, safe place?
Yes. And hi, Angie. Good to have you here. I think that in some ways it's kind of what we've been speaking about here, of finding those anchors of safety, titrating around what breath evokes, so that you might just focus on the sensation of the breath at the tip of your nose. And is that a tolerable sensation? Where, so often when we think about what triggers us or leaves us to feel activated around somatic experience. It's what resides in the core of the body. Also, interestingly, kind of where we might think of the vagus nerve connecting us interoceptively to our emotions in the belly, in our heart and chest, in our throat, right? In our jaw, right? So all of those places are going to hook us in a little bit more actively to memories of the past where we might have felt emotionally flooded or overwhelmed. So if we bring our attention to the periphery of our body, as a way into building more tolerance for being with more of this interoceptive inner world, it's a bridge. So if you're connecting to breath and trying to do that a little bit more safely, you might just notice the sensation at the tip of your nose, right? Or you might breathe, but simultaneously find a mudra with your hands, right? That allows you to bring your attention, to more of the periphery rather than all of this internal sensate experience.
Yeah.
There's the lovely work, Jan, I'm sure you know of Babette Rothschild's work, and right, who's also a somatic therapist. And she speaks about anchoring dual awareness with exteroceptive attention to balance out that interoceptive flooding. So the interoceptive world, for those where that language is new, is basically what you're feeling inside. And it gives us access to our emotions. But our exteroceptive world is our five senses: what you see, what you hear, what you can touch, what you smell, what you taste. So if we focus exteroceptively while we're breathing, we can build a bridge back in. And then maybe you titrate or you oscillate your attention to a little bit of sensation, and then you come back out and you go in and out, and you can build that over time with those cues exteroceptively. That I'm connected to you, Jan. I see your face, you're right there, right? Or that feeling of I can look around and see the flowers in my space, or I can hold something in my hand that helps me feel anchored and safe, right? Some of you know I like pine cones, right? I touch pine cones a lot, right? Or rocks, so that you can hold something that's an anchor as you build that capacity.
I think this is a question I get asked a lot, and I think it's so important. And actually, as we started, I had started with noticing around you and deciding. You let your body decide whether it wants to go in today or in this moment, and maybe it doesn't. And that's just fine.
Yeah.
That is just wonderful, because, so many of our clients, so many of us as human beings don't feel safe to touch into this place in the middle of the body, the center of the body that Jenlyn talked about so much. This is where the felt sense forms, right? But when it's not safe, then we stay out here, and we really feel quite fine about that.
Yes.
And we're doing it together, all of us here together. Mm-hmm. And so the people that don't feel, or in that moment, you don't feel safe to go in, you are with all of us, or some of us who are doing that. Right. And there's that co-regulation. Mm-hmm. It's that invitation that it is okay to do this. And some people are really okay to do it in this moment. So yeah, so wonderful to be. And you wrote something about this a couple of months ago that I really liked. And we had actually a guest on, Joya de Cruz, in our PVI group, and she talked a lot about grounding from the outside. Mm-hmm. Yes. And when I've had people say to me, I hate those things where you go in like that. I always feel like there's no space for me here. Yeah. And that's the last thing we would want, right? So yeah, very, very important question.
I love the way that you're speaking about this, the taking the pressure off, because that feeling of pressure or shame kind of messes it all up.
And shame, right? It's like, oh my God, look at them all. They're all doing this stuff in the middle of their bodies. And I'm not going anywhere near that. Thank you very much. Yeah. So I know for me, I need to really always remember that. And I try to now, it's just part of the beginning of clearing space.
Beautiful.
And I think if we build that into our practice like that, it just becomes so much more welcoming, right? Of everybody. And even if you do feel like going in, there are certainly times where you don't.
That's right. That's right. And, it so parallels how I started the book, right? Like the first practices in there actually teach, how do we orient to safety? How do we choose dual awareness practices? How do we recognize that we have choice as to whether my eyes want to be open or closed? Do I want to engage in this breath practice or not? Do I want to engage in a movement?
Yeah, that's exactly what I think I was reading that you had written. Maybe a little blurb of it was on your website or something, but I love that. It's very important.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Another one, Rashawn?
Yeah. I'm gonna just jump off that one with two questions actually that maybe this one can follow on with the previous one. So first question, as a coach teacher, this is from Michael Allison.
Michael.
As a coach teacher, we might touch into someone's breath without flooding them interoceptively by just having them follow our voice, counting a cadence aligned to shift their. Oh, sorry. I think the question. Sorry, wrong one. Question is from Polly V. Sorry, Michael, that was just a comment. It just went up. So grateful to be here. Looking forward to reading your new book. I've been doing yoga regularly only past 2 years on Zoom, and notice certain poses and one kriya feel unsafe. Breath of fire causes overwhelm, anxiety, worse when with arm pumping movements or anything chest up. Should some breaths be avoided if a person has HX complex trauma, flight freeze responses?
Right.
And then just maybe because we're running out of time, I'm just gonna add another question on top of that, which I was gonna do just then from Style Bohanan. What are your favorite techniques to help move children into safety, ventral, and also to move them from sympathetic to ventral vagal?
Oh, I like that question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. All right.
I'm going to speak to I'm going to speak to Michael's comment very briefly and just say that listening with your left brain to the count or paying attention to your own count or someone else's voice counting you through breath is a great anchor that gives your mind something to focus on, so we don't begin to kind of ruminate on those worst case scenario thinking around sensing the breath. So it's a nice additional resource there. Also in response to kind of practices to avoid, right? So say you have a history of trauma and you're going into a particular style of yoga that maybe has, like maybe it's Kriya based, maybe it's keep up based, it has this pressure, it has this intensity to it, and you're kind of launching yourself into this class and you feel like you're needing to keep up with the other students or do a certain Kriya because other people are doing it, and your body is saying something else. I really want to emphasize to start here, honor you. Your body is always going to be your greatest teacher in the room, always, right? And especially when you have a history of trauma, really honor you. If you're going into a Kapalabhati or a breath of fire or some kind of really intense breath practice or movement practice, and it's stimulating, those breath practices will inevitably stimulate some sympathetic activity. They're meant to. When I was studying, and I speak about this in the book, when I was studying what happens with Kapalabhati breathing, right? If you're unfamiliar with it, it's a rapid inhale, exhale through the nose. It is meant to basically bring in some sympathetic, and then we pause and we go back into active recovery, back to parasympathetic. It's good if you can tolerate that and you can go towards it. But if you're not ready for that, it's too much, too fast, too soon, and it would be overwhelming and it would backfire. So it's all about choice. It's all about right timing. And I'm not going to say that there's a prescription to say never do this breath if you have a history of trauma. I'm going to say, listen to your body and let it give you feedback and feel like you're choosing a challenge rather than being forced into a challenge. And then that next question around kids, And so both of my kids, they're now 17 and 19, but they both had a lot of sensory processing challenges. It was actually one of the other arenas that brought me into the polyvagal work, because I worked with occupational therapists very young, or when they were very young, 2 and 4. So we're talking some years ago. And that was when I first got introduced to integrative listening systems. The ILS at that time didn't have the safe and sound protocol, but they had the focus program. Right. And so I actually co-worked with an occupational therapist in our building. And I, at the time, was doing play therapy with kids. And so we would basically co-treat. We would have the kids doing the sound program, and then I would be doing play therapy with them, and so on and so forth. And my kids did the same thing. But because, especially with my son, again, he's now 17, hopefully he won't mind that I share this story, but he, and he's now like full on athlete, like had a lot of energy in that little body, that we then later learned when he was a teenager that like what he really needs is to run, to cycle, to cross country ski. He has a lot of energy in him. And when it's directed, he's fabulous, right? But as a 4-year-old, he had all that bound energy and he was bouncing off the walls. And, and so then later he would go to kindergarten, he would come home and he would just have these meltdowns because he was sensing, feeling everything, and his body didn't have the chance to process all of that through. So a lot of what we did in terms of a regulation space for him, in addition to the sound protocol work, was create a really safe decompression space in our home. What's now my yoga room at that time was his, after school space that had a mini trampoline, yoga, gymnastic mats, big fit balls, and we would just play together because we would go into the play zone as a way to work with all of that intensity. And then he could come back into the regulation zone, right? And back into connection. But initially it would show up as fight. And so to take fight and to play with fight, right? And so that was his. My daughter was more introverted, and hers would be more to go inward. And so a lot of it was like cocooning and creating like these really safe spaces of like tents that she could go into, and blankets, and like I'd be on the outside and she could peek out, and similar work that I would do with the kids in my practice.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful work. Well, we're coming to a close. Wow, that went fast. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to bring us back to gallery view so we can see everybody, because it's always so lovely to see everybody. And yeah, great. So we tried to upgrade. I think that the room stopped at 100, Rashawn. I don't think it worked this time, but we do promise that we will work on that so that we can take lots more people for next time, for all the times that come ahead. And so please do join Mighty Networks and the PVI app. We're transitioning over from our Wix group, so asking everybody to do that. And thank you so much, Arielle. That was so much fun. Really wonderful. Yeah. And I hope everybody had a good time. And that lots of questions will come, and that now that we've got the Mighty Networks, the PVI app, it's going to be a lot easier for us to connect with each other and to continue on with these discussions, because we're really starting a big community, right, of changing the way that we think about it. It's this big paradigm shift into a real strength-based model, and really welcoming and honoring the wisdom of the body. So it's a wrap. Thank you so much, Arielle. I hope you'll come again and just be with us. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, everybody. Be well and be safe. Take good care of yourselves. Rashawn, will you stay for a minute? Okay, bye. Bye. I'm going to save the chat before I go. Save chat. Good. Oh, good idea. Everything. Yeah. All right. And thank you, everyone that was here on Facebook Live.